After defeating Palpatine, Anakin, who had been trained since birth and was developing to his full potential, helps rebuild the Jedi Order after Order 66, with new principles and new techniques, allowing for emotional and family connection. Luke becomes a powerful Padawan, and Leia is raised by her mother Padme and her grandmother Shmi Skywalker on Naboo. Years later, Ahsoka discovers that after Palpatine's death, he left behind a sinister plan to gather young people sensitive to the Force to create the Inquisitors. These young people were secretly trained in an isolated location, where Palpatine's Force Ghost often appeared to command them. In addition, Palpatine assembled a team of scientists with a specific goal: to develop a method of resurrecting him in a new physical body. One of these young people even managed to infiltrate the new Jedi Order, serving as a spy. The plan culminated in an attack on the Jedi Temple, using advanced weapons to try to destroy the Order before they could be discovered, demonstrating Palpatine's persistence in eliminating the Jedi even after his death. After the Inquisitors' attack, the feeling hanging over the Jedi was more one of defeat than victory. Although they had repelled the immediate threat, the losses and the knowledge that their enemies were far from eliminated left a shadow of unease over the new order. Palpatine's presence remained a dark influence, even so long after his death. In the new Jedi Council, now made up of Yoda, Mace Windu, Obi-Wan, Anakin, and Ahsoka, discussions intensified. The main question was how Palpatine had managed to build such an elaborate structure of Force-sensitive scientists and Inquisitors without the Order noticing. It was clear that he had acted in a meticulous and calculated manner, leaving dark legacies that still threaten the galaxy. Even more than a decade after his death, Palpatine remains the greatest enemy the Republic and the Jedi Order have ever faced, said Mace Windu, with a serious expression. What had once seemed like the end of his influence now seemed like just a new beginning for the threats he had orchestrated. Yoda, reflecting on the situation, commented, "It's like a nightmare that refuses to end. The question is, where are the so-called scientists? And what else could Palpatine have been up to before his death?" The silence in the council was heavy, as everyone knew that these answers would be crucial for the future. Obi-Wan, always analytical, raised a hypothesis. What if this base we discovered was just one of many? Palpatine was known for his strategic vision. He would certainly have spread out his resources to avoid being completely defeated. Obi-Wan's words echoed in the thoughts of the other masters. Mace Windu, agreeing with the idea, said, "We need to concentrate our efforts on locating these possible bases and finding the scientists who are still working on Palpatine's plans. We cannot allow them to advance any further." The determination in Windu's voice inspired the group, but also made clear the colossal challenge they faced. Yoda, with his peculiar wisdom, looked directly at Anakin and said, "If Palpatine influences the material world from the other side of the Force, so must we. We must find a way to reach him in the spiritual world." Yoda's proposal was bold, but it made sense considering Anakin's unique connection to the Force. All eyes on the council turned to Anakin. He was the chosen one, and his exceptional abilities in harnessing the Force made him the best hope for confronting Palpatine's persistent threat. What's more, his scientific and creative approach put him in a unique position to explore uncharted Force territory. Anakin, taking responsibility, agreed with Yoda with a slight nod. He knew that the road ahead would be arduous, but he also knew that this was his mission as the chosen one. "I'm going to Naboo to explore this possibility about the Force more deeply and seek answers," he said, his voice firm. Deciding to start his search in a place of peace and connection, Anakin set off with his Padawan Luke for Naboo. There, in the quiet forests, he would find the balance he needed to delve deeper into the techniques he had developed and seek out new revelations. He knew it would be a long road, but the hope of protecting the galaxy and fully rebuilding the Jedi Order motivated him to continue. The Jedi Council decided to intensify the investigations started by Ahsoka, focusing on the possible facilities and bases mentioned by the rumors and the undercover spy. The aim was to dismantle any remaining structures belonging to the Inquisitors and locate the scientists who were following the instructions left by Palpatine. New interrogations were carried out with the Jedi woman who had infiltrated the Order. Under constant surveillance, she began to reveal more details about how Palpatine had orchestrated his actions. According to her, there were at least 3 bases spread across the galaxy, each dedicated to a different part of Palpatine's plan: training, scientific experiments, and the storage of Sith artifacts. Ahsoka and Obi-Wan were assigned to lead the search. With the help of other Jedi, they spread out across the galaxy, following the clues obtained in the interrogations. They were looking for signs of Sith activity and any evidence that could lead them to the bases mentioned. The mission was dangerous, but essential to weaken the enemy and protect the new Jedi Order. Meanwhile, on Naboo, Anakin took advantage of the first few days to be close to Shmi, Padme, and Leia. He knew that family time was precious and provided the emotional balance needed to face the challenges ahead. After a brief period, Anakin retired to the forests of Naboo, where he would begin another internal journey of self-discovery and exploration of the Force. Anakin, as the Chosen One, carried a unique burden. Born of the Force itself, he possessed a quantity of midichlorians far above normal, which gave him the ability to explore the potentials of the Force in a way that no other being could achieve. He knew that his mission would require him to go beyond the limits of what was known about the Force. With Palpatine now acting as a threat on the spiritual plane of the Force, Anakin knew he had to fight him on that same level. However, there was a dilemma: he was still alive. Unlike other Jedi who connected to the spiritual plane after death, Anakin would have to find a way to influence this side of the Force while still in his physical body. Determined to find a solution, Anakin began to develop methods of projecting his consciousness beyond the physical world. He believed that if Palpatine was able to influence the material world from the spiritual plane, he could also create a reverse method, acting in the spiritual while still alive. He knew the task would be extremely challenging. Anakin understood that perhaps this was the mission for which the Force had created him, to establish balance in both the physical and spiritual worlds. If anyone could achieve this feat, he believed it was his responsibility as the Chosen One. Anakin plunged into a deep state of meditation, isolating himself completely in the forests of Naboo. His goal was to make his experience of the spiritual side of the Force as real and tangible as his presence in the physical world. He knew it would be a long road, but he was determined to explore the depths of the Force like never before. While Anakin deepened his meditations in the forests of Naboo, he instructed Luke to take the time to relax and spend a few days with his family. He knew that these moments were crucial to maintaining his son's emotional balance and strengthening the bonds that united them as a family. In one of his many conversations with Padme, Leia, and his grandmother Shmi, Luke recounted in detail all the recent events involving Palpatine and the Inquisitors. He talked about the battles, Ahsoka's discoveries, and how dangerous the threat left by the former Sith Lord still was. The intensity of his words kept everyone on their toes. Padme, who had known and lived with Palpatine for most of her life as Queen and Senator, was astonished to hear about the extent of his destructive power. To her, it was almost inconceivable that one man could cause so much harm, even after he was dead. Her memories of Palpatine as a cunning and manipulative ally resurfaced. Curious, Luke and Leia asked Padme to tell them more about Palpatine. They wanted to understand how someone like that managed to fool everyone for so long. Padme then recounted how he rose to power, using the chaos of the Clone Wars to consolidate his influence, and how, for years, he manipulated the Senate and the Republic with his apparent wisdom and benevolence. Leia, always with her strong personality, felt especially indignant at Palpatine's persistence. He had destroyed everything she held sacred in the Republic. For Leia, the Republic was a symbol of justice and order, something Palpatine had almost destroyed with his dark and treacherous actions. Through Padme's influence, Leia had been developing in politics on Naboo. Her mother had always encouraged her, indirectly grooming her from childhood. Leia grew up hearing stories about Padme's struggles and victories as a ruler and senator, and this shaped her vision of justice and leadership. Padme, although she had been away from politics since the birth of her children, always kept her passion alive. She passed on all her knowledge and experience to Leia, who seemed to absorb everything eagerly. Leia was becoming a promising political figure, proudly representing the legacy of the Amidala surname that meant so much to Naboo. Over time, Leia rose to prominence in Naboo politics, showing a maturity and vision that impressed even the most experienced. Her name was associated with strength and renewal, reflecting the same spirit as her mother. Leia seemed destined to follow in Padmé's footsteps, defending the ideals of the Republic. In a conversation with Luke, Leia showed an interest in finding out more about the Jedi's investigations. She wanted to understand how she could help and how politics could support efforts to combat the threats that still persisted. Her curiosity only grew as Luke explained the challenges the Jedi faced. It was then that Leia had an idea. She suggested that the senator from Naboo lead a movement in support of the Jedi investigations. She believed that, with political support, the searches could be intensified and would gain more legitimacy. Both Padmé and Luke thought the idea was excellent and saw it as a way of joining forces for the greater good. Leia, determined to help the Jedi and honor her mother's legacy, went to the senator of Naboo, a longtime friend of Padmé. The senator, who was unable to leave Naboo at the time due to political and social commitments on the planet, surprised Leia by suggesting that she herself represent Naboo in the Senate. Leia was hesitant for a moment, but when she realized the impact this could have, she accepted the proposal with pride and responsibility. With the support of an official Naboo entourage, Leia set off for the Senate, ready to ask the Jedi for help on behalf of her planet. Luke, on the other hand, remained on Naboo, following the instructions of Anakin, who had ordered him to stay to continue his training and maintain his connection with his family. Meanwhile, the investigations led by Obi-Wan and Ahsoka were progressing. Both returned to the Jedi Temple with worrying news. The findings indicated that the operations left behind by Palpatine were much more extensive and organized than initially imagined. The scale of the threats was alarming. Ahsoka revealed that she had found evidence of a base that appeared to be an advanced laboratory. The information suggested that it was there that the scientists were trying to create a new body so that Palpatine's spirit could be imbued, realizing his plans to return to the physical world. Obi-Wan, for his part, brought back even more disturbing information. He discovered the possible location of a base that functioned as a training center for the Inquisitors. However, what he found was much more than that. Palpatine was organizing a kind of Sith army. This new Sith Order seemed to be formed to confront the Jedi directly on an unprecedented scale. The Jedi Council began to formulate theories about what Palpatine had planned. It was assumed that, with his death and the possible extinction of the traditional Sith, the rule of two had been abandoned. Palpatine seemed to have chosen to create a Sith army, an order that could carry out his plans for domination and rival the Jedi led by Anakin. Palpatine's awareness of Anakin's role as Chosen One was evident, especially considering how Anakin defeated him. The Council knew that Palpatine considered Anakin a threat and that this entire shadowy organization was probably being prepared to neutralize him and take definitive control of the galaxy. Faced with the gravity of the situation, Mace Windu proposed, "Since the threat is much greater than we imagined, perhaps we should seek the support of the Senate to launch an attack with Republic troops. We can't face this alone." The proposal brought a reflective silence from the Council, but was soon accepted, considering the urgency of the situation. The four masters of the Jedi Council headed to the Senate for a special hearing. There, they would seek political and military support to face the new threats. It was a delicate situation, as the Jedi traditionally avoided getting involved in political issues, but the magnitude of the danger demanded extraordinary measures. When the Jedi Council arrived at the Senate, they were astonished to find a heated discussion in progress. To everyone's surprise, the speaker was none other than Leia Amidala, representing Naboo. The daughter of Anakin and Padmé was already stating exactly what the Jedi had come for: the support of the Senate to face Palpatine's remaining threats. The Jedi Masters were impressed by Leia's attitude. Ahsoka, in particular, was thrilled to see the daughter of her master and her friend Padmé speaking with such force and enthusiasm. Leia exuded the determination of Anakin and the eloquence of Padmé, defending the Jedi like a true leader. The debate was intense. Although the Senate recognized the importance of the new Jedi Order in maintaining peace, many senators had difficulty believing the narrative presented by the Jedi. For them, the idea that Palpatine's spirit still posed a threat seemed like something taken from old tales rather than practical reality. Leia, sensing the resistance, adjusted her approach. In her speech, she highlighted the heroic deeds of the Jedi in protecting the Republic. She recounted recent and historical events, including her father Anakin's decisive role in defeating Palpatine. Her ability to tell the stories with passion and precision captivated many of those present. "Regardless of your beliefs about the Force," said Leia, in a firm and determined tone, "the Senate and the Republic owe the times of peace to the Jedi. They deserve our vote of confidence. I'm not asking you to believe in the Force or its mystical powers, but to believe in the Jedi who have protected us for so long." When Leia finished her speech, silence overtook the Senate. The depth of her words and the power of her presence had made a profound impact on everyone present. The 4 members of the Jedi Council accompanying the audience were visibly moved and proud. Leia had not only defended the Jedi Order, but also exalted their role in a way that few others could. Ahsoka watched Leia with tears in her eyes. For her, it was as if Padme were there again, defending justice and peace, but now through her daughter. Mace Windu, usually restrained, admitted to himself that Leia had a power of persuasion that few politicians possessed. Yoda, in his wisdom, looked at Windu and commented, "Strong in young Skywalker, the Force is." Windu, still amazed by Leia's stature, replied with a simple nod, in full agreement with his master. For the Council, that moment seemed like a confirmation that the Force was working for balance in many ways. Not only through Anakin, the Chosen One, but also through his descendants, who continued to shape the destiny of the galaxy with the same courage and determination. Senator Bail Organa then took the floor of the Senate and declared firmly, "What the representative of Naboo says is the purest truth. The Republic owes a great deal to the Jedi. They deserve our unrestricted trust, regardless of our beliefs about the nature of the possible threat. We must support them in whatever way they need." His words were met with applause and support from several senators. Bail Organa's speech encouraged other senators to also take a stand for the Jedi. One after the other, they began to express support for the intervention of Republic troops to help the Jedi. As a result, the measure was approved, guaranteeing the military support needed to face the threats revealed. Leia returned to Naboo with the news, taking the good news to her superiors who had sent the mission. This had been her first major diplomatic mission, and she had shown herself to be a promising political figure, earning respect and admiration for her skill and determination. On arriving on Naboo, Leia was warmly welcomed by Padme, who was visibly proud of her daughter, and by the senator of Naboo, who congratulated her on her successful mission. Leia had once again elevated the Amidala name, which continued to be synonymous with leadership and strength on the planet. News of Leia's success quickly spread throughout Naboo. The population saw in her a young leader who was following in her mother's footsteps, bringing hope and pride to the kingdom. Leia's determined and articulate image was beginning to shape the political future of Naboo and the Republic. Leia reported everything that had happened in the Senate to her brother Luke, who listened attentively. He was extremely proud of his sister, admiring her courage and ability to convince the senators to support the Jedi. However, unease began to grow in Luke, as he knew that a great battle was about to take place and Anakin was still in retreat. Worried, Luke commented to Padme and Leia, "A battle is about to begin, and my father has not yet returned." Just as he said this, the communicator in his hand began to ring. When he activated it, a hologram of Obi-Wan Kenobi appeared, asking Luke to go to Anakin and inform him of the urgent situation. Obi-Wan explained that the Jedi needed both Anakin and Luke for this battle. The Council's call was clear. Luke, determined to act, quickly got up to head towards the forests where his father was. But when he opened the door, he bumped into Anakin. Luke, surprised, said, "The Council has just warned me that." Before he could finish his sentence, Anakin interrupted calmly, "I know, we have to go." He then looked at Leia, who was there in the room with Padme, and with a proud smile said, "You did very well, Leia. Thank you." Everyone in the room was amazed at how Anakin seemed to be completely aware of what was happening before he was even told. Anakin's deep connection to the Force was undeniable, and his presence conveyed confidence to everyone around him. Everyone in the room was perplexed by what had just happened. Even though they were used to Anakin's impressive powers, this time he seemed to have more knowledge than usual. Not only did he know what was going on in the room, but he also seemed aware of everything that had happened in the Senate, even from a distance. Anakin, with his usual serenity, looked at Luke and said, "Let's go." Padme, worried, stood up to say goodbye, but Anakin made a calm gesture with his hand and said, "We'll be right back. Don't worry." He spoke with such confidence that Padme and Leia exchanged glances and, smiling, sat down again. That seemingly simple gesture would later be understood as something much deeper. Anakin and Luke left for Coruscant, where they found the Jedi Council already prepared for the mission. The plan was clear. Yoda would lead a squad together with Ahsoka to attack the base where the scientists were, while Mace Windu would lead the main force, made up of Jedi and Republic troops, to confront the Inquisitors. Anakin and Luke would be on the front line of this second group. When the force led by Windu arrived at the location identified by Obi-Wan, they were faced with a terrifying sight. An army of Inquisitors was waiting, lined up in battle formation. Various weapons and battle droids reinforced the front line, forming an overwhelming force, just as the Council had predicted. As the group advanced, they noticed something ahead that drew even more attention. An imposing-looking machine stood out in the center of the enemy army, with a figure in front who seemed to be the leader. As they approached, they were shocked to recognize who it was. Palpatine. He was not in a physical body, but as a manifestation of the dark side of the Force, sustained by an energy field emanating from the machine. It was as if the machine had managed to densify his spiritual presence, making it visible and tangible to everyone. "So that's how he commands them," said Obi-Wan, carefully observing the surreal scene in front of him. Palpatine, even as a Force ghost, seemed to exercise total control over the army of Inquisitors. Anakin, staring firmly at the figure, said, "You have to trust me." Anakin turned to Obi-Wan, Mace Windu and Luke and continued, "Stay here and keep information. No matter what happens, don't interfere." Luke tried to argue, but Anakin's gaze made him back down. He knew that his father was determined and that he had a plan. Before moving on, Anakin looked directly at Windu and said, "When it's all over, give the order to attack." Windu, although reluctant, nodded his head in agreement with Anakin's words. He understood that the Chosen One was preparing to face something that only he could confront. Anakin walked steadily towards Palpatine, his presence radiating a confidence that seemed to disarm even the most skeptical. Luke, however, watched apprehensively, his heart racing. "It's too risky. Palpatine is treacherous," Luke exclaimed. But Obi-Wan's reassuring words echoed, "Trust in the Force, Luke. Your father knows what he's doing." This brought a little calm to the group, even if the tension was growing. When Anakin got some distance away, Palpatine, with his typical sarcastic tone, said, "The Chosen One, you really trust your powers, don't you? But I don't think you realize what you're up against." Then he raised his hand, and Force lightning shot out towards Anakin, shocking everyone watching the scene. Luke watched in disbelief. "He can reach the physical world even from the other side?" he asked, almost in a whisper. Obi-Wan replied, perplexed, "How is that possible?" It was a demonstration of power beyond anything they had believed possible. However, the rays of the Force stopped just over a meter from Anakin. An invisible field generated by the Force protected him. It was as if Anakin were an impenetrable wall, untouchable by the dark energy emanating from Palpatine. Palpatine, knowing Anakin's potential well, gave a cynical smile and teased, "You'll never defeat me. You may beat me here, but I will always return. You can't prevent my return." Having said that, he launched another wave of lightning, but this time it hit the void. Anakin had disappeared. Everyone's eyes, including Palpatine's, widened in astonishment. What was happening? Then a faint blue light began to glow a few meters from Palpatine. Slowly, Anakin's figure reappeared, but this time directly in front of Palpatine. Anakin, with a serene tone, declared, "You will never return." Palpatine, now clearly shaken, shouted angrily, "You may be the Chosen One, but you can't stop me on this side of the Force." His despair was evident, but Anakin remained unshaken. With frightening calm, Anakin replied, "Don't you understand yet? I am the Force." As he said this, he raised his hand, and a blast of Force lightning shot out of his palm, hitting Palpatine squarely. The former Sith screamed in pain as the energy emanating from Anakin grew exponentially. The intensity of the energy generated by Anakin increased with every second, until it culminated in a massive explosion that hit not only Palpatine, but also many of the Inquisitors, droids, and weapons around him. When the dust settled, the battlefield was silent, and much of Palpatine's army had been reduced to fragments. After the explosion, Anakin turned his gaze to Luke and gave a slight smile. It was at that moment that Luke understood what had really happened. His father had never left Naboo. When he appeared at the door to call him, it wasn't his physical body, but a projection of the Force, like some kind of ghost. The magnitude of the technique left Luke speechless. Everything began to make sense to Luke. Anakin hadn't allowed Padme to hug him goodbye before he left. He knew it wasn't her real body, so he avoided any touch. Luke realized that this was the result of the new technique his father had developed during his retreat in the forest of Naboo, something far beyond anything any Jedi had ever done. The technique had a clear purpose: to confront Palpatine on the same plane of the Force on which he was operating. However, a doubt began to creep into Luke's mind. Was his father all right? But then he remembered Anakin's words to Padme and Leia, when he told them not to worry and that they would return soon. Those words brought Luke a sense of relief. Luke also understood why Anakin had decided to remain on Naboo. He needed his physical body to be in a safe place while his projection ventured into the confrontation with Palpatine. The strategy was risky but brilliant, demonstrating once again why he was the chosen one. After smiling at Luke, Anakin turned his gaze to Mace Windu and nodded slightly, indicating that the moment had arrived. Windu, immediately understanding the signal, gave the order to attack. Jedi and Republic troops advanced together, ready for the decisive confrontation. The Inquisitors, still disoriented by the massive explosion caused by Anakin, tried to reorganize themselves. However, the destruction of a significant part of their forces had drastically reduced their ability to resist. They were clearly outnumbered. The combat began with full intensity. The Jedi demonstrated superior skills, using the Force and their sabers with lethal precision. Although the Inquisitors were numerous, they didn't have the same mastery and connection with the Force that the Jedi possessed. The battlefield quickly began to tilt in favor of the Republic. The Republic troops also played a crucial role. With strategic training and military discipline, they managed to neutralize much of the advanced weaponry that had been prepared under Palpatine's orders. It was a coordinated force that the Inquisitors were not prepared to face. After a long confrontation full of casualties on both sides, the Jedi and the Republic troops finally managed to achieve victory over the Inquisitors. Palpatine's Dark Army was broken, and the base was taken, marking an important moment in the fight against the threats left by the former Sith Lord. After the battle was over, Mace Windu received a message from Ahsoka informing him that the laboratory where the scientists were had been easily overrun. She explained that almost the entire contingent of Inquisitors was concentrated at the base where Palpatine had organized his forces, which facilitated the mission led by Yoda and his squadron. On the battlefield, as the Jedi and Republic troops began to reorganize, Obi-Wan approached Mace Windu and commented, "What would have happened if Anakin hadn't destroyed Palpatine and part of the Inquisitors?" The question hung in the air for a moment, and they both exchanged contemplative glances. Perhaps Palpatine really would have had a chance of victory if it hadn't been for Anakin. Windu replied seriously. His ability to influence the Force, even after his physical death, is something we've never faced before. But once again, the Force has managed to strike a balance through the Chosen One. Luke, who was listening to part of the conversation, asked the Council for permission to return to Naboo and check that everything was all right with his father. With the approval of the Masters, he embarked immediately. Despite having witnessed Anakin's incredible power, Luke felt the need to confirm for himself that his father was safe. On arriving on Naboo, Luke found Anakin in the garden, accompanied by Padme and Leia. "Anakin, with his characteristic calmness, smiled when he saw his son and congratulated him on winning the battle. Of course, thought Luke, he already knew. This deep connection with the Force made Anakin unique, and Luke admired his father more and more. Luke, curious, asked for more details about the projection technique Anakin had developed. Anakin replied calmly, "I'll teach it to you one day, Luke. When you're ready, you'll be able to do the same." Anakin's words left Luke hopeful, knowing that there was still much to learn from his father. Shortly afterwards, Shmi Skywalker arrived to join the family. With everyone gathered, the Skywalker family could finally celebrate and rest after yet another victory against the dark side. It was another moment of peace and togetherness for them all. Shortly afterwards, Luke Skywalker completed his training and became a full Jedi. Years later, his ability and connection to the Force led him to be invited to join the Jedi Council, a position he accepted with humility and responsibility. Luke became an important figure in rebuilding the Jedi Order. Leia Amidala, for her part, has followed a remarkable political path. She became Queen of Naboo, like her mother before her, and was later elected senator, representing her people with the same passion and determination that Padme had always shown. Her name became respected throughout the galaxy. The Skywalker twins, following in their parents' footsteps, continued to play crucial roles in the galaxy. Both became instruments of the Force, each in their own way, ensuring that balance and peace continued to be preserved in a universe that, despite its challenges, always found hope in the light.